So Elder Scrolls Online set during the Second Era, which is about, what, 1,000 years before Skyrim, it sounds like?
Yep.
That's correct. Yeah.
Were you pitched on the idea? Did you guys get a pick with the time frame it was set?
So we did get to pick. I think it's one of the earliest things when Matt and Todd first got together that they talked about was, when is this going to be set in the Elder Scrolls timeline? And I think that, 1,000 years. There was a period of time called the Interregnum, where a lot of history was not known. And so there was this point of, or a big conflict that took place that kind of set all this up. We thought, wow, there's a point in history where there's not a lot of actual written history. That seems like a good place for us to fit. And I think that was a part of the decision making.
When working on the game then, the lore, were you thinking that, well, we should have some kind of like epic disaster where it destroys all evidence of what happened at the end of the game? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice little period of time, right, where it's home to tons and tons of false pretenders to the throne. So anything we do here changes the world a little bit, but doesn't have a long-lasting effect. Like, you can have one alliance go and claim emperorship, and until the next emperor comes along, when the next alliance comes in and trounces over them. So
A bit like Game of Thrones, keeps changing hands.
it's always changing.
Sure.
Right?
What kind of tools do you guys use in terms of keeping track of the history? Do you guys have a certain database you use, or are there certain like people who are just like know everything about Elder Scrolls and you can just ask them a question whenever you need?
We have a lead writer, Lawrence Schick, who communicates weekly with all of the folks down in Rockville about the game, about the lore. So we talk about the lore. We make sure that anything we're doing coincides with their belief on the lore at the time. Of course, internally we keep a timeline of, hey, here's when these things happened. Lawrence has written a ton of backstory for us about here's what was happening up until the game starts, and so there's a large backstory. What it does is it provides us a believable setting for the game, so all of our NPCs have the correct motivations.
What are some of those elements that make Elder Scrolls that you guys were like, well, we have to have all this in the game?
We've got a lot of really cool epic things in the Daedra. We like to lean on that a lot. We've got all the really cool lore that goes along with the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild. We have Mana Marco, right? The first necromancer of Tamrielic lore, and so we're leaning heavily on him and trying to reintroduce familiar aspects of the Tess lore into our game.
You said Mana Marco?
Mana Marco.
Yeah, what's his deal?
Mana Marco is the first necromancer.
Yes.
And he plays a huge part in our main story. Rich can tell you a lot about that. The content team is worked on this main story, and it's fantastic in the fact that you actually get to see Mana Marco earlier than you have ever before. It's 1,000 years in the past, but he plays this large role.
He's a pretty prevalent character in all the Elder Scrolls, lore. You see him in lore books. You actually got to fight him in Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion. He's been resurrected at that point, and so at this point in our timeline, you're kind of seeing him before all of that.
You guys have any events? You said it was not talked about much that period, but were there any events that some of the earlier games set up or talked about in a lore book? They were like, oh, well, we got to get that in the game.
One of those events is the Akaviri invasion, right? And we kind of set that up as a little bit of a backstory behind some of our alliances and why they've actually grouped together as Ebonheart Pact. That's one of the reasons why they kind of got together and joined forces, was to fend off this Akaviri invasion.
So what's the story there? What happened there?
They basically fended off the invasion. I believe it was like 10 or 15 years before the start of our game, something like that.
It's really close to that. Right.
And so they're just coming off that victory, and they're working together to kind of forge ahead.
I think one of the other things that we've been doing, you talked a little bit about establishing lore as well, and that timeline that happens just previous to the game. We have a war that's taken place in the Daggerfall Covenant. I want to say it's like 50 years prior, that they call King Rancer's War, and the player actually gets to experience the effects of the war, and through means which will probably remain unnamed at this point, they actually get to experience a little bit of the war themselves. And so getting that richer, deeper lore of, hey, there was something that happened here, it's part of history. Again, it just keeps the player, grounded in that, like, hey, this is actually a real place. These are people with real problems, which is something, again, that I think is really key to the license.
So there's a lot of fans of the Elder Scrolls series out there. People who played Morrowind, Oblivion, whatever. What can those fans look forward to? Like, say I played Oblivion a lot. Like, what do I look forward to look to? What do the Skyrim fans have to look forward to?
So one of the expansions for Morrowind was the Tribunal. People who go into Morrowind will again get to meet the Tribunal, which was these almost godlike beings for the Dark Elves in the game. And they'll see them again, they'll interact with them, in now what is 1,000 years in the past. The story we've got around the Tribunal is really interesting, as we have a pretender who wants to insert themselves into the Tribunal, so to speak. And that's a great nod for anybody who's been clamoring to play Morrowind again and get that same feeling, and who knows all of those stories. So I think that's a really key element for us.
Fans of Skyrim, you're going to be going, to, some Skyrim territory, and we've taken great pains to try to recreate the feel of Skyrim in our time.
The land of Tamriel is always built on all these ruins, and you come across Daedric ruins or all those like ancient histories that how are you guys, or what's your maybe philosophy about communicating some of that history to the players without it being confusing?
I think it's great. Even recently, we've upped the number of ruins that you run across, because we felt that we didn't quite have the density of ruins we wanted in the game at the time, or the great exploration feeling. So you will hit Daedric ruins, you'll hit Ayleid ruins, you'll hit old forts, things of that nature, caves, all over the place. So again, I guess the running joke is a stone's throw away. But literally, I think you can't run more than maybe a minute and a half across the world without hitting something that's interesting. And some of these smaller ruin sets may not even have what you'd consider a quest or something like that. They have something interesting that's taking place there, but it's not formal. Again, it's rewarding your exploration for going around and seeing this. And part of that is our lore library, for instance, where you might find a book there. And that book would actually be related to where you found it. So if you found that book in, say, a fort in Skyrim, an old rundown fort, that book would actually tell you a little bit about it. And the nice thing is, once you collect a book as part of this collection game, you can go back and you can read that book at any time that you've collected it. It doesn't take a part of your inventory. It just gets added to your collection. And again, that's the way you gain reputation with the Mages Guild. So all of these different ruins, tend to have these greater stories written about them at some level.
Since this is a prequel game, do you guys think you might be able to set it up where things people actually do in this game might get turned into lore for some future Elder Scrolls game?
I hope so. Absolutely. In working with Bethesda again, working on the IP, they've been really open to what we're doing. Since we're vetting it with them a lot, I think they're hopefully excited about saying, yeah, this is actually a part of canon now, and we want to make this something that, is a nod and players will see. So, no guarantees on that front, but I would say certainly that's a goal for us.
How much history did you guys create for this game?
We've created a lot, but we've also had a lot to dig through and sift through and really try and learn. Like, it's 20 years worth of Elder Scrolls that we've had to try and digest and then work with. One
of the things that we have while it's taking place is that timeline that goes back 50 years, not just our time, again, to hit on that setting, but even going forward, what are going to be the new quests and those things. And we do a little bit of work for, hey, here's kind of how we see the expansions working, in the game. But again, we're waiting because we want to see what the players do at the end of the day. And I think that's going to be more fun than any plans we have, which, okay, that gets thrown out because the players are doing this now. And
yeah, absolutely.
And that's great.
Well, and Rich, you talked about the online, like going online and seeing how the fans react as being a really enjoyable experience. You guys ever go and check out those the Elder Scrolls wikis? I know there's a couple of them out there. Do you guys find that they're in pretty good shape?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that the consumer does, the fans do, is incredible. They have stuff that I never knew about. I'm sure some Bethesda guys never knew about, and it's all there, and it's really awesome to see that.
There is nothing quite like going to these sites and seeing just the amounts of knowledge that they've accumulated, and in convenient places. We have a running inside discussion about lore. What is set in stone is only what's ever been in a game.
Right.
And then the rest, though, are reference materials that we can use from the books that have been in games and things like that. But it's fascinating to read just how exact some of these wikis are, some of these different pages are that talk about the lore. And I'm literally blown away. Like, wow, that was a reference I would have never seen. That came from Arena. I thought, oh wow, I played that game, I don't know how long ago, and sure enough, there it is.
Well, we haven't brought it up yet, but fans of Skyrim really love dragons and fighting dragons. Will we see dragons in online?
They are not a part of that, a part of our game yet. We definitely have plans for them when they show up. We're not sure yet, but we have some plans.
Have some plans.
We do.
To put dragons in the game.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So this is not a period where dragons didn't exist.
So it is a period of time where the dragons are not around for various reasons, but we're definitely exploring ways to bring some back.
Like you jump into a VR machine and like battle VR dragons?
Probably.
Sorry
not
to
that
ruin the
way.
surprise.
Probably not that way.
Well, thanks a lot for your time, guys. Have a good rest of the day.
All right.
And good luck making more history.